Welcome to It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach. I am Sister Arnetta Legree from It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach. It's Getting Better All the Time provides information and support while encouraging hope and faith to individuals living with the impact of a severe mental illness or negative life situation. You can find out more about us by logging on to our website at igbatt.com or igbattmho.org. You can give us a call on our 1-800 number, which is found on our website, or 301-755-5413. Again, this is It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach, providing information and support while encouraging hope and faith. And today what we're going to be discussing is rejection and living with a difference. The difference we're going to focus mainly on is living severe mental illness, but you can take that and apply it to anything that makes you different. Because when you're different from the mainstream society or the main group, it can cause a lot of different feelings, a lot of negative feelings if you're not careful, right? So again, as I said before, this is It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach, providing information and support while encouraging hope and faith. And we talk about mental illness, but we talk about it from a faith-based perspective as well as from a clinical perspective as well, okay? So I wanted to go over, when you talk about a persistent mental illness or a severe mental illness, people use the terms differently. Some people will say SMI, severe mental illness. Sometimes we'll say SMPI, severe persistent mental illness, chronic mental illness. You're talking about illnesses that are so severe that they impact all aspects of an individual's life. We know that mental illnesses are brain illnesses. We're talking about biologically based illnesses. We're not talking about right now spiritual illnesses that are triggered from something spiritual. We're talking about biologically based illnesses, just like you would be diabetes or just like hypertension or any other disease, right? So when we talk about mental illnesses, we're talking about brain illnesses, and there are different types. There's several types of mental illnesses. There's a big book we talked about before, the DSM-5, that kind of categorizes all the different types of illnesses. And when people ask the question, well, what causes a mental illness? We know there's no one cause. It really depends on the diagnosis. For example, there's research that shows that some illnesses are more genetically triggered. Then there are some illnesses that are more environmentally. When you think about PTSD, for example, so it just kind of varies with the illness, okay? But the big thing is when we're talking about severe mental illnesses, we're talking about, as I said, illnesses that are so severe that they impact all aspects of an individual's life. All mental illnesses have an impact on an individual's life. Okay? Think about thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. It will impact all those different areas. Now, some more severe than others. When we talk about severe and persistent mental illnesses, we're talking about an impact as far as being able to raise children properly or being able to engage in the society and get a job or hold a job consistently. You start seeing maybe homelessness. You start seeing more individuals with SMIs are incarcerated. You may see them going in and out of jail. So it's on the spectrum of mental illnesses and then severe mental illnesses. More so, we're talking about schizophrenia, bipolar, certain forms of depression as well. One of the things that categorizes severe mental illness, we're looking at psychosis. As we talked before, psychosis or being psychotic means being out of touch with reality. That's all it means. A person is out of touch with reality, and we usually see delusions and hallucinations. You can see psychosis in a variety of illnesses, but many times you do see them at some point when a person is living with or impacted by schizophrenia. So for those of you who do not know anyone with a severe mental illness, let me just read off some of the challenges and things that they may have to go through. And for those of you who are listening to me, and if you do have a severe mental illness, as a schizophrenia or bipolar, email me, igbatt1@aol.com, and let me know some of your experiences that we could discuss and maybe we could share with the larger group. I can tell you that, the first time that a person is diagnosed with the illness, they may not accept it right away. Some people may be relieved to know, hey, finally I have a diagnosis. I know what's going on with me. Sometimes it can be scary. It can be, a lot of times you can feel as if you don't know who to trust. You can feel, especially when you're hearing voices, auditory hallucinations, you can feel real anxious, you can be nervous, you can be depressed. But when we're talking about living with a mental illness day to day, many times people feel embarrassed. Okay? They feel embarrassed, especially if they had an illness that required them, let's say, to have to be go to the hospital against their will. In that case, let's just say the police, somebody had to come and pick them up and take them to the hospital, and that can be embarrassing, right? So sometimes they feel embarrassment. Sometimes they feel, especially in the cases of family members or parents, you may feel like disappointed. And it's okay to admit that, because when your child was born, you had all these great plans for him or her, and now you realize that maybe those plans will have to be adjusted. So there can be some disappointment. There can be some shame. There can be some, feeling withdraw. You withdraw. You feel like maybe you're not good as good as other people are. Other things I wanted to read here, and I'm reading this from psychalive.org. Number one, you feel like you don't have control. Sometimes, and I don't think it's anytime you have a chronic illness, right? You have periods where you're doing fine, and you think you're beating the illness and things are going well with you, and then you have a relapse, right? And if you keep having relapses or episodes over and over again, it can lead to depression. It can lead to sadness, because you think, okay, I just got over this hurdle, now here we are again. So mental illness feels like you're losing control of you. You don't know who you truly are, because this disease controls you and takes over your emotions. And it does. And when that happens sometimes, you can feel pretty sad. I was talking to a gentleman earlier this week, and he was talking about, loneliness, how he feels really lonely. A lot of his friends are moving away and things of that nature. And we were talking about how that in the past that would have been a trigger for him, for him to start drinking, start using drugs, start drinking. And we were talking about how, sometimes you feel like you don't have any control. You feel like things are being done to you, and you feel like you don't have any options. And I was pointing out to him, and we were talking, that, hey, you do actually, look how far you've come. You're not in the same place that you were before. But my point being is that when you have episodes, triggers or things, well, we all have triggers, but when you have episodes or things that you're doing fine, you're doing great, and then something happens, and then now you have an episode, and then things are going well, then you have an episode. Things are going well, you have an episode. It can be tiring, it can be frustrating, you can feel like, what am I doing wrong? And I'm here to let you know you're not doing anything wrong. It's just part of the illness. Once we understand, once we become to accept that this is the illness that I have, whatever it is, it can bring about better, much more healing, a much more sense of peace. Because when you realize that this is part of the illness, episodes are part of the illness, right? So when you talk about anything, a chronic illness, whether it's chronic, whether it's diabetes or schizophrenia, you're going to have those highs and lows. You're going to have those periods where you're doing fine, and then something will happen and you may be doing less fine. The key is that when that happens, is to take a look at what's happening in your life at that moment and begin to make some adjustments and changes. But one of the things that people do feel like they don't have any control. So again, for those of you who do not know, or you don't have anyone or any experience, know that when you're dealing with someone, you're engaging with someone who's living with a chronic illness, a chronic mental illness, that sometimes these are feelings that they may have. That is not easy. It's not easy being them. Okay, just think about it. For individuals who may not be diagnosed with a mental illness or chronic illness, you may have periods where you feel, unsure of yourself, or you don't feel very confident. Well, it's double so for those individuals who are living with a chronic mental illness, right? They may not, individuals sometimes don't feel very confident in themselves because they made mistakes before. And society and people around them kind of make them feel unsure. And again, sometimes it's not meant to be that way, but sometimes it can come off that way. So you feel like you don't have any control. You feel like, everything is being done to you as opposed to being you having control. I want to let you know you do have control. One of the first things that you do have control over, and I'm talking to individuals now who are living with a chronic illness, mental illness, is that you do have control over, and you have control over your acceptance. The first thing is accepting your illness, understanding it, learning it, and beginning to realize, okay, this is going to be part of life. This is part of who I am. This is what makes me unique. Okay? Another thing, how people feel sometimes, that they can't move on. Mental illness feels like a crushing stone on my chest, making it hard to breathe. It makes me feel trapped, not being able to stop the flood of past memories or the continuous cycle over in my head of conversations I've recently had. It makes me feel hopeless, alone, scared of myself, scared of everyone else, helpless, embarrassed, and ashamed. So let me read this again. And this is from Sarah Noel, and I take this off of Psych Alive, but when I talk to many of the people that I work with, they share these same sentiments as well. And it says, mental illness feels like a crushing stone on my chest, making it hard to breathe. It makes me feel trapped, not being able to stop the flood of past memories or the continual cycle over in my head of conversations I've recently had. It makes me feel hopeless, alone, scared of myself, scared of everyone else, helpless, embarrassed, and ashamed. Okay, so let that sit in. These are feelings that many of us have felt at one point or another, but again, it's compounded when you have a chronic illness. So you feeling like people are watching you, you feeling like you're going to make a mistake, you don't know what to say, you're feeling like you don't matter, you're feeling like you don't have any options, that you don't have any choice, you can feel like, fragile. And again, let me just say this, if you're living with someone with a severe mental illness, you want to realize that they have episodes. They're not going to always be in a psychotic state. They're not going to always be in a state that they are. And we have to begin to, as a family member, as friends, loved ones, you have to know when to pull back, right? You don't want to always make the person feel that they can't succeed. I was working with this one young lady, and she wanted to go visit some friends, and her mother was like, no, you can't go, because she was afraid, didn't think she can do it, right? So one day her mother called, she really frantic, wanting us to really talk to her daughter, because what her daughter had done is when the mother went to work, that the daughter took a cab, went to go visit her friends, and came back. And her mother was just so frantic and so, anxious about that. And we began to talk, as a team, to say, hey, what she did was really normal. It's okay to want to, she wanted to go visit her friends. What was the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is that this person, the daughter, has a chronic illness. The mother, she had a history of going in and out of the hospital at one point, and this is how the mother saw her. The mother saw her as someone who always was going to need help. To some extent, that's true. She saw her as someone who was less able than she really was. And we had to begin to kind of work as a team and say, hey, she knew to take a cab. She knew that she needed to have money. She went to the right house. She was able to do these things. So again, sometimes out of fear, as family members and friends, out of fear, we kind of shelter the person with a chronic mental illness, or our loved one, whether it's friend, family, whatever. We tend to shelter them and not letting them progress. One of the questions that I like to ask people, especially family members or parents, okay, who are really sheltering their kids, and I'm not saying that we should not do that, but when you're really sheltering your kids, ask yourself this question: who's going to do the sheltering if you were to drop dead today? Right? So family members, if you were no longer there, if you were going to drop dead today, have you prepared your loved one that's living with a chronic mental illness or a severe mental illness, to be self-sufficient? Right? Are you allowing them to take the bus or learn how to take the bus, or are you allowing them to know how to do the cabs, to cook, to be, all of the things that we do? Living with a mental illness, having a mental illness, doesn't mean that the person is stupid, right? It doesn't mean that the person is less able. It just means that they have a disease. and the disease is a mental illness. That doesn't mean that they can't do things, right? What happens is when a person has a first diagnosed with a mental illness, especially if they're older and they've been diagnosed for a long time, without knowing it, the system kind of creates this situation where people, without even saying it, we create a system where we make the person feel like they're unable to do certain things. You know, we have somebody managing their money. Well, they can manage their own money, right? We have somebody, you know, telling them this and telling them that. You're at home, you know, every time they don't do something, you want to say, oh, did you take your medications? You know, all this type of stuff. So we have to take a look at how are we really engaging the individual, because having a mental illness and the person's on the right medication, if they need to take meds, doesn't mean that they're stupid, doesn't mean that they can't do certain things, that they can't think, that they can't process information, that they can't go to school, that they can't work, that they can't have a family, you know, that they can't have kids. They can do all these things. They can do all the things that you do. They can move the same way that you can move, probably just a little slower or a little differently, okay? But again, for some people living with a mental illness, it's a fear thing, because they've been made to feel like they can't for so long, that when they run across someone like you or myself who kind of pushing them, they may kind of, you know, retreat. They may feel a little fearful. They understandably will be afraid, because they've heard for too long that they can't. Even if you don't say it to them, we give them that option. You know, I have individuals that I work with who are living with a mental illness who drive. They drive. And I'd have some people who don't have a mental illness, don't even have a license. So it doesn't mean that you can't do it. So just kind of remember that. We want to realize that living with a mental illness doesn't mean that a person can't. It just means they may have to do things a little differently, okay? But again, for many people living with a severe mental illness, it can bring a lot of fear, and it can bring that embarrassment. Right? Another thing is, some people feel like can make you feel like that people think they're lazy because you don't want to do anything. You don't want to get out. When we talk about schizophrenia, for example, we know one of the symptoms of schizophrenia, it can look like a person is quote unquote lazy, but that's not the case at all. That's not the case at all. So again, we're feeling like person, I can't do anything. I'm unable. So when we feel this way, this can lead to a feeling or a spirit, if you will, of rejection. So we're talking about people living with a mental illness, feeling this way, feeling rejected because of they feel inadequate, they feel like something is wrong with them, they feel like, you know, no one, not to say no one understands, but that they feel ashamed and embarrassed, right? Because people are looking at them, people know they take medications. And going back to the young lady that I talked about with the cab, one of the things that she would do often is she would talk to herself. So sometimes she would sit anywhere, you know, she could be at the beauty shop or whatever, she could just start talking to herself. And her mom was like really embarrassed, and, you know, so, but she had to learn to give her daughter that independence, right? She had to learn to work with her daughter and let her understand, and well, the mother more so had to understand that, hey, you may not be around, and what are you going to do? You know, what are you going to do if you're not around and you haven't taught your loved one how to do certain things, or you haven't allowed them to progress or to mature? You know, so you want to kind of think about that. And the end of the story was she actually did well. She was able to do well. And, you know, we talked about, okay, the next time you want to go to the store, to visit a friend, maybe you can talk to your mom. Well, she didn't want to talk to her mom because her mom wouldn't let her go. But it started out, the mom would say, okay, I'll drive you. You know, first of all, let me know, I'll drive you. And then things begin to progress. Slowly, but it did progress. So again, living with a severe mental illness, it brings on certain feelings. Because many times, again, when you are, let's say, in high school, many mental illnesses start when a person is in school. So what happens when a person is in school? They begin to withdraw. They don't fit in with the rest of their peers. They begin to become maybe special education classes. They start having symptoms that no one knows what's going on with them. They know it's something going on, but other people may not know. So what they do, they may start using drugs and alcohol. And as we talked about before, many people who started using, who are adults now, who are chronic alcohol substance use users, started when they were younger, and they started as a result, in response to symptoms that they were having. They didn't understand. They just knew that once I started drinking, the drinking helped me to calm down. The marijuana helped me with my mood. They didn't understand that maybe they had a mood disorder that would have been, if we would have known, would have been treated much better. Okay, but I want to talk about rejection. That's where I want to spend the rest of this broadcast. Right. So again, two categories. You got people with a severe mental illness or chronic illness dealing with rejection because of their illness, and then you have people who are dealing with rejection as a result of maybe you grew up in a single home, family home. Maybe your mother was an alcoholic or on crack, or everybody in the neighborhood knew and you were embarrassed. Maybe you were the poorest person in your house or the poorest person in your room, in your neighborhood, and you were embarrassed about that. All the other kids' parents were, doctors and lawyers, and your dad was a cook or something like that. Maybe you're embarrassed because your child is not as pretty as the other people's child, or not as smart. Maybe you're embarrassed because all your friends have children, you don't have children, or you're embarrassed because everybody's married and you're not married, or everybody's married and you've been divorced, or whatever the case is. All right, embarrassed. There's so many reasons why a person can be rejected. Rejection because your brother has a different father than you do, and his father would always come over and take him out and wouldn't take you out. It could be a lot of reasons for rejection. People are dealing with this right now, and I can see it. When you just look at what's happening in the media, what's happening in YouTube or social media, you're seeing as a response a lot of people who are dealing with rejection. They don't even realize it, that hey, what you're dealing with is as a result of that. But I just want to read this briefly. We're not going to, just something to share. This is from our book, Don't Let Your Thoughts Limit You, and you can get it for free, I think, on our website. Okay, so let me go ahead and read this. Rejection. Okay, if you have ever been rejected in your life, it is understandable that you may be a little hesitant about placing yourself in situations in which you could potentially be rejected again. That makes sense. But do not allow a fear of rejection to control you. When you allow a fear of rejection to control your life, you limit your potential and your ability to move forward in the purposes and plans God has for you. Yes, we may be rejected sometimes, but we must remember that even when man rejects us, Jesus Christ is always in our corner. So how does this relate to what I started talking about? Anytime you have something that makes you different, when we talk about living with a severe mental illness, and when we talk about some of the feelings that you can have, right? You can feel like scared, embarrassed, ashamed. You can feel like you have no control. You can feel like people are laughing at you, right? All these things will lead to go along with this rejection. And I talked about the spirit of rejection, so I'll go interchange. But when I'm talking about a spirit, it's not just the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. I'm talking about a spirit as well as something that gets into you, that joins with your spirit, right? That's what I'm talking about. And then in addition to, you can have thoughts of rejection, feelings, behaviors. Because if you start thinking in response to a rejection, you're going to do certain things. So what happens is, because that feeling of rejection is there, right? You feel a certain way about yourself. When something happens, a person can say something, and you're going to respond in such a way that it's going to be kind of maybe doesn't make sense for the moment, but you're really dealing with that rejection. So, for example, if someone says something, a husband and wife walk by, and I say, "Oh wow, they make such a great couple. He's such a great husband." Okay, if your response may be, "Well, so I don't know what kind of." You can say something like, "Well, please, he ain't all of that. He's not all of that. A woman don't need a man. just I'm using that for an example, right? Or something like that. It looks like when you make that response, people might say, oh, she's jealous. And that could be the case. But many times what that response is really coming from is a feeling of past rejection. Okay? We may say, I don't want to do something. A person might invite you, hey, why don't you try doing this? You say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. That's for squares, or that's for people, I don't want to do that. And the reason why you don't want to do it is because you're fear of being rejected, right? You don't want to be embarrassed, because if you're that embarrassed, it really triggers rejection. So you don't want to do that. So rejection many times is hidden behind a lot of other things. So it's really rejection, but it may come across as something else. It may come across as aggression. It may come across as embarrassment. It may come across as anger, right? It may come across, people might say, oh, you're just jealous, you're hating, right? But really what it is, at the root of that, is this feelings of rejection. Because you were rejected before, right? And you don't want to be rejected again, so we put up this wall, right? We put up this defense mechanism. The problem with putting up a wall like that, right, is that you can't get out and people can't get in. Opportunities can't get in, right? Good things can't get in. When we talk about Jesus Christ, as we talk about in this broadcast, as we said before, the Bible itself is not a feel-good book, right? Life happens. Good things and bad things happen in life. What we have to learn to do is how to deal with both the good and the bad, and begin to ask the Holy Spirit for a strategy, a way to deal with life in general. We have to do life. But many times we'll retreat. And we'll retreat behind this, people say, oh, she's so mean, or he's so mean, or he's so hateful. And what it is, that hate, that anger, that temper, that drinking, that alcohol, that those behaviors are nothing more than a mask for rejection. Okay? So let me read this. Like I was saying before. Again, it's understandable that no one wants to be rejected. But sometimes you have to take the risk to get out there. Because if what you're doing, withdrawing, is causing you to not to be what God has initially called you to be, then you may need to be something else, right? If what you're doing is causing you to be contrary to the Word of God, whatever the Word of God is saying in the Word about you, saying that what you are, if He's saying, woman of God, you're going to be great, man of God, whatever the case is, then that's what you are. But what happens, everything comes to kind of take us away from that, right? It comes to take us away from what God has called us to be. It makes us think something else. So again, when we talk about rejection, where does the fear of rejection come from? An individual can develop a fear of rejection from a variety of places, to include a history of abandonment. We have a lot of people that are in foster care. We have a lot of people as adults, as children, we're going from one place to the other, right? We have parents who's leaving children. We have spouses. We have, people who are saying, I love you today, you don't see them tomorrow. So a history of abandonment, abuse, physical, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, peer rejection. Your people laugh at you when you were younger. People talked about you. Family issues and other negative situations. For example, some parents, for various reasons, may have one favorite child and one not so favorite child in the family. The not so favorite child grows up feeling rejected by his or her parents, and because of this, they go through life feeling like something is wrong with them. Then there are situations in which a child has grown up without the presence of a loving parent or a stable home, and consequently has grown up feeling rejected or different from everyone else. So when we look at what's happening in the foster care system, we have a lot of people, a lot of children that are lingering in the foster care system. So what do you think happens to them when they become adults? What happens to the feelings of abandonment? It just grows. We have a lot of people who are in jail. We have a lot of physical abuse. We have a lot of sexual abuse. We have a lot of husbands leaving their families. More importantly, we have a lot of fathers leaving their children. Mothers too, but we have a lot of fathers leaving their children. What do you think that happens to a child, when the father just walks away? And even though the mother is there and the mother, is doing great, I think we have wonderful mothers. But again, what do you think it does when that father is not there and that father abandons the child? Then what does the child do? I have a friend, again, his father wasn't there for him, and he has taken on this real hard shell, right? This real hard shell. I didn't need a father anyway. I turned out so great. And to a certain extent, maybe that's true, but I can tell you that you can see the absence of father. You can look around and you can tell a person who had a father in their life, a good father in their life, and those who didn't. Those who just maybe had a mother, and I'm not, because I just had a mother, and I thank God for that. But what I'm saying is, that can lead to abandonment. There are consequences. There are consequences when we don't do things the way God has intended for us to do it. God has set forth a plan for us, a wonderful plan, and there's a reason. Because parents are supposed to be the kids' shield. But if there's no shield, and parents and children are left to fend for themselves, there are consequences for that, okay? And one of the consequences is they grow up feeling rejected. Even though they may think they're okay, even as adults, you can have adults, 50, 60 years old, think they're okay. Oh, I made it without this, I made it without this. And then you can look at their lives and look at the way they think, look at how they behave. You can tell that there were some consequences of not having that father in the home. I just wanted to throw that out there. But regardless of the source, feelings of rejection, like other negative emotions, can trigger or open the door for a host of other unhelpful thoughts and behaviors. So when you're feeling rejected, feelings of guilt, a poor self-image, a tendency to degrade oneself, anger at other people, hatred, self-pity, distrust, a lack of self-confidence. You can't even today really engage in a conversation with someone. We are not even able to sit with differences. You say tomato, I say tomato, and then that causes a fight. Why does it cause a fight? Because again, look at rejection. Look at the rejection, the consequences of rejection, and what it's done to us. Because when we feel rejected, or we've grown up feeling that way, or somewhere along the way we pick that thought process up, then we're automatically on the warpath. We automatically get upset when people don't agree with us because we think that everybody should agree with us, and we get into a fight, and and it just gets real kind of strange. But what it is from that rejection, that unhealed feelings, those spirit of rejection. I never felt good enough and got dirty. I'm not going to let nobody push me around. I'm not going to let nobody take advantage of me. I'm not going to let nobody tell me what to do, because I've done what I've been there, done that. Why? Because I remember when I was 5 years old, when I was 8 years old, when I was 10 years old, this happened to me, and I'm not going to let it happen to me again. I'm going to be a fighter now. So now, which is great, but now you don't even listen. And the least little thing, trigger. And when I use the word trigger, what happens is, what do we mean by trigger? So example, you and I'm talking to you on the screen. I could say something. There's some of you that not even listening to anything that I'm saying because of something I said when I first started the broadcast. Because you're thinking, no, that's not true. That's not true. Okay, well, it's not true. Move on. But you're perseverating about it. That's not true. That's not true. Fathers are not that important. Fathers are not that important. Why are we fighting over that? Okay, mothers and fathers are both important. But what happens is something that was said that triggers you, that takes you out of the moment and takes you back to what happened in the past, or something that made you feel a certain way, where you had to defend yourself, and that's where you're stuck. Well, and you're not even listening to what the other people are saying. Okay. Whenever we are feeling vulnerable or anticipate being rejected, we erect emotional defenses as a way to protect ourselves from pain. That's normal, okay? Whenever we are feeling vulnerable or anticipate being rejected, we erect emotional defenses as a way to protect ourselves from the pain. So when you go someplace and you already feel like the people are going to not agree with you, or you have to defend yourself, there is, for example, this group that they are wonderful singers, right? And I like listening to them when they sing, but they are very orthodox in their dress, okay? They're very orthodox in their dress and their way of thinking. And it's just so interesting to me. Now, these people not bothering anybody, they're not saying anything to anybody, they're just singing their praises to God. how someone else will come up and automatically they get this feeling of what do you call it? They have to comment. Oh, someone will say, oh, they sing so beautifully. Oh wow, I just like it the way they're so holy. Their attire. Well, hell, everybody don't have to dress that way. No one said anybody had to dress that way. What happened? They're feeling convicted, so they have to make a comment. But the conviction really comes from, again, a form of rejection. They automatically go on the defensive. When they see a person that looks different from them, they automatically go on the defensive. Okay. If you don't want to dress that way, that's you. No one is saying that everybody has to, dress orthodox or a certain way. If you don't want to, dress how you want to dress. Okay. They have chosen to dress orthodox or more holy, if you will, in accordance with the scripture. If you don't have to, that's on you. Well, God doesn't care about that. Well, if that's your belief, that's fine. No one even said anything to you about it. But what is happening is, so the entire time they're unable to enjoy the song because in their mind they're fighting. And they're fighting. What are they fighting? They don't even know why they have a bad attitude or why they're on the defensive. But you automatically go on the defensive because they're automatically triggered because of something that happened to them or something that somebody said 50 years ago. So it's important to stay in it now. When we talk about being emotionally healthy people are able to sit with differences. Okay? Here we go now. Okay, whenever we are feeling vulnerable or anticipate being rejected, we erect emotional defenses as a way to protect ourselves from the pain. Feelings like denial, avoidance, anger, and hostility are just a few of those man-made emotional defenses we use to control the pain of rejection. Unfortunately, man-made defenses, like the fig leaves Adam and Eve used in the garden to hide their sins, only conceal. They don't heal us. So when we respond with anger, when we're really feeling rejected, that doesn't heal us. Okay, it doesn't bring about healing. It's not helpful. Okay, it just conceals the feelings of rejection. Man-made defenses or gimmicks give us the illusion of being free, but the feelings we are trying to cover up always have a way of manifesting themselves in other areas of our lives. It's going to show up, right? That's why you're so angry. That's why when somebody says something or that you don't like, you're unable to sit with it. You can't just sit with it and stay in the moment. You automatically transport it to something that happened 50 years ago, something that somebody said, or you automatically go on the defensive and get, put up this defense mechanism. Covering up our feelings can cause us to go through life being on the defensive and fearful in our relationships with other people. But please know that God wants to heal you and make you completely free from the influence of your past. Because of the resurrecting power of Jesus Christ, you don't have to spend the rest of your life being controlled by a fear of rejection or any other negative emotion. Jesus Christ didn't rise again so that your man-made defenses, because it's man-made defenses, that's all they are. They don't work. Living with a fear of rejection can cause you not only to shy away from people in certain circumstances, but it can also keep you from embracing your future in the call of God on your life. And even if you live in, let me say to individuals, I don't care, you could be psychotic right now, even if you're living with a mental illness, in God's eyes, you are no different than anyone else. You have a calling. You were made for a purpose just like everybody else was. And so you do have a calling. He made you, okay. Yes, you do have a call on your life. And we go on to say that. You can get this from our little booklet, so I'm not going to read it all. But I'm just going to say, don't let a fear of rejection keep you from experiencing all that He has for you. What happens again, and remember, this God has come that you might have life and life more abundantly. That's in spite of, I don't care how many medications you're taking. I don't care how many voices that you hear. I don't care how many relapses that you have. I don't care how many nights you cry. I don't care how many times you feel like you can't make it or that you're going to die by suicide, that you're going to take your own life. God has come. Jesus Christ has come. God manifests in the flesh so that you might have life and life more abundantly. The problem is that everything, your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, other people's thoughts, feelings, and behavior, society, the books that we read, TV, everything that's around us, trying to come to convince us otherwise. Feelings of rejection, shame, embarrassment are all designed to get us to shy away from the plan that God has for you. God is moving, Jesus Christ, through His Spirit, which is the Holy Spirit, is pushing you forward towards the destiny that He has for you, right? When He is pushing you forward towards that destiny, He already knew that there would be periods where you would have to stop and take a break. He already knew that you take medications. He already knew that sometimes you get depressed and have episodes where you can't get out of bed for days at a time. He already knew that you're going to feel anxious and overwhelmed and where you can't even talk, you can't even leave your house. He already knew that you're going to feel like, the giving up, that he already knew that. He already knew that there are going to be times when you feel like going out to the bridge and jumping over. He already knew that there were times that you actually did jump over, and thank God you were able to make it, that somebody was able to recover you. He already knew how many times you were going to be in the psych ward, how many times you were going to be admitted. He already knew all of these things. He already knew, right? But He's still saying that I've called you for a purpose. He's already saying, I love you with an everlasting love. You can't let other circumstances, thoughts, or you can't make it, you're stupid, you're an idiot, your family, your friends, YouTube videos, what's on the news, cause you to make you think you're not going to make it. Because all of those things around you will get into your head, and you begin to internalize those things on top of how you're already feeling on the inside. The thing is, your disease is not a limitation. It's not a limitation at all. It may slow you down as far as man is concerned, but it's not a limitation to God. Because the limitation is how we think. And I'm not talking about you hearing voices, because hearing voices is not a problem. It doesn't stop the Holy Spirit of God in your life. You seeing things doesn't stop auditory hallucinations. It doesn't stop what God is doing in your life. Hallucinations, I'm sorry. It doesn't stop it. The delusions, the way you think, it doesn't stop it. What stops it is when you allow, or I allow, other thoughts to override that. When we get to the point where we can accept the fact that this is what's going on with me, okay? I'm a person, I'm living with schizophrenia. I'm a person, I'm living with depression, and sometimes I'm going to have illnesses. Then it will open up the door for so much more faith and grace and God's ability to rest on your life. Because once you understand that this is what I have, I'm dealing with an illness, I'm living with a mental illness, and that this is my life, then and you begin to ask the Lord, to come in and show me what to do with my life, He'll begin to show you. The problem is that when you think that your illness, your disease, somehow defines what you can and what you can't do permanently. No, it may delay it. So again, like I think I used this example before, I may be a double amputee, and I had plans to run a marathon. No, I may not be able to run a marathon the way I originally thought in my mind, but I can run a marathon using other mechanisms, right? But I will not be able to see that if I'm always so focused on what I want, how things should be. We can get so focused on how things should be that we overlook how things are. Sometimes you just have to accept that this is the way things are. And once you begin to accept that, then that's when the healing can begin to come in. And you can begin to ask God for another plan. Rejection will make you feel that other people have to help you, or other people have to change, and other people have their own problems, just like you have your own problem. I got my own problem. Whatever you want to call it. We all have challenges, issues, circumstances, trauma. We all have them. Right? So no one person is better than the other or different than the other. The thing is, when it comes to God and His ability to give us a plan to deal with our life. So number one, when we talk about living with a severe mental illness, understand that it's going to bring in certain negative feelings about how we feel about ourselves. Okay? Two, if you're living with any circumstance that makes you different, whether it's a learning disability, or you could be, like I said, it could be a family issue, anything that makes you feel different. Everybody else around you is rich and you're poor. You're just going to bring in feelings of embarrassment, shame, low self-esteem. All of that will come in. Number three, rejection. Whenever you start feeling these ways, a certain way, embarrassment, a shame, it's going to go along with feelings of rejection. Rejection will cause you to draw back. And when you draw back, that means to stop. That means you're not going to move forward. It means you're going to not feel like you can make it. You're going to feel fear. You're going to allow fear to override you. Right? So that's what I mean when I say you draw back. When God is calling you to move forward, you draw back because you're afraid. Okay? When the opportunity comes up for you to take a new job, you don't take the job because it's going to require you to speak. And you're not a good speaker. So you're going to draw back and say, no, I'm not going to take the job. Right? The job may require you to talk to new people that you're not used to talking to. You draw back because in your mind, you say, no, I'm not a good speaker. What happens is, again, you want to find out who you are, look into the Word of God. Okay? Male, female, child, boy, girl, whoever you are, look into the Word of God. And the Word of God will tell you who you are. And then what you have to do, any thought, feeling, and behavior that comes that make you think that you're not what God has called you to be, you are not what He designed you to be, then you have to know that is a curse, that is something that's coming from the enemy. And what is the enemy? The enemy is any thought, feeling, or behavior that causes you to shy away from, to draw back, or to reject the Word of God, what God has for your life. God has a good plan for your life, but we draw away. We allow fear, allow feelings of rejection. Some of you men, the right woman is right there, but because of past hurts, you don't want to be rejected again because the last woman rejected you. You don't follow through. The same thing with women. You don't want to follow through with this particular guy because the last man that you dealt with hurt you, and from now you made up in your mind you're not going to let another man hurt you, so you're going to hurt them first before they hurt you. So rejection causes all types of issues. How can we overcome rejection? How can we get past rejection? Number one, just a couple of things. Realize it when we feel the feelings, right? When you start feeling a certain way, ask yourself, why am I so focused on this one thing that this person said? Why am I automatically on the defensive with this individual? Do they remind me of somebody or something that was said 50 years ago? And if so, how did that make me feel? Right? So we have to feel the feelings. We have to get to a point where we're able not push the feelings down, but we have to begin to feel the feelings. And sometimes when we're triggered by something, by asking ourselves these questions, okay, why am I feeling this way? The woman didn't say all that everybody has this feeling or all the time, so why am I thinking that I have to always be on the defensive? Why do I always have to feel that I'm always fighting and that I always have to, everything is a cause? Why do I always feel that way? And start asking yourself these questions, okay? When did I start doing this? And as you start asking yourself these questions, it may take you back to a period, let's say when you were 10, I'm just, again, using it for example, at 10, and that particular thing happened to you, but you never dealt with it. You went through life and you just stuffed it, which is why it just comes out at really strange kind of times and opportunities. It just comes out, right? You want to kind of deal with whatever that's dealing with you. Excuse me. So that's number one or two. So you got to recognize what's going on with you, okay, and why it's going on with you. Why do you feel the way you feel it? And stop blaming, the narcissist. That's the word now. Oh, because the person is a narcissist. That person is gone out of your life. That person has to deal with God just like you have to deal with God. Because the thing is, if that person is out of your life, I'm sorry, I could have checked my time here. If that person is out of your life and you're still reliving what the person did to you, they're not out of your life. They're still in your head. Okay? If you're still reliving over and over and over again what the person said, what the person did, how they look, then that person is still in your life. They're just in your life here. You have to get to the point where you kind of get them out of your life by getting them out of your mind. And that takes some time. That takes some work. But it's called focusing on what the God has called you to do. Focusing on your life and the changes that you can make. Okay? But again, you have to recognize it. You have to realize it. You have to begin to bring those thoughts and feelings to the surface at the right time and begin to talk them through. Also, for some of you, whenever time you feel the nerve to draw back, you got to push forward. You got to begin to push forward and say, I'm going to take the job. You have to take the job fearful. You have to do it afraid. And I know some people, you shouldn't do it afraid. For some of you, you have to do it afraid. Because if you don't do it afraid, you'll never do it. You'll talk yourself out of a good opportunity because you're afraid to do it. Some of you, your procrastination, your need with trying to have everything perfect. I got to make sure this is right. I got to make sure this is right. I got to make sure this is right. Is really rooted in your fear of rejection, your fear of embarrassment. Some of you, need to go, just park your car or get off the bus and go into a car dealership, a dealership that you can't afford. Go into that dealership and say, I would like to look at a Tesla, or whatever, a BMW, right? And some of you, and you need to do that. And some of you say that is the stupidest thing. Well, you don't need to do that. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to some of you who need to do that. Because some of you, because of rejection is making you feel that you don't deserve anything. It's making you feel you're not worth much. It's making you feel that you can never have the finer things, right? So you don't even think about it. So for you going in there to do that, it gives you an opportunity to kind of work through the fears, to see something different, right? Some of you may need to go into a store and look at things that you're not going to buy and you can't afford. Some of you, it's just going into the store. Then I don't have that money. That's fine. Why? It doesn't cost anything to look, right? So some of you may need to do that. Some of you may need to go take yourself out to dinner and buy something that you normally wouldn't buy on the menu in the restaurant. Buy some lobster, steak, or whatever the case is. Some of you need to do that. Some of you don't. Because some of you, as a result of dealing with rejection, your issue is not low self-esteem. Your issue is that you have too much self-esteem. You too overly, what's the word I'm looking for? You compensate. Your rejection looks like people look at you and they think, oh wow, she's really confident. No, you're not really confident. That's your rejection, but you're overly, what is the word I'm looking for? You're compensating. Okay? So some of you are compensating where it looks like you're very confident. It looks like you don't have a self-esteem problem. It looks like you have it all together, but you're really not. Because you're the one that do things 50 times over and over again. You're the one that your mind is always racing. You're always thinking. People don't really realize just how fearful that you really are and how anxious you really are. But you just look good. Okay? So you have to have a different strategy. But again, everyone has to identify what's going on with them. Because all of these behaviors, rejection, fear, embarrassment, is keeping you from fulfilling the plan that God has for your life. Because what happens is, because things have happened to us, because we feel a certain way, we think that's what we are. We think because I feel a certain way, or I think a certain way, I behave a certain way, then this is how I must be. This is how I must be. I must have been born this way. I must have been called to be this way. No. You were called to be what God had called you to be in the Word. Everything else is a lie. Everything else is coming that's contrary is a thief. What is it stealing? It's stealing the potential that God has for you. Remember, God has come that you might have life. The enemy has come to steal, kill, and destroy. He's stealing your victory. He's stealing the plan that God has for you. He's killing the way you think about yourself. Okay, that's the enemy's job. God's job is to move you forward. The enemy's job to bring you down. Okay, so you got two things happening at the same time, right? And you have to decide which side you're going to yield on. If you yield on, the enemy's side is always the easier side. It's always easy to give in to how we're feeling. It's easy to give into how we think. It's easy to give into how we to sin, if you want to look at it that way. It's easy to go drink, to alcohol. It's easy to to think it's nothing to me, and to allow that behavior to rest in our psyche. That's easy. It's always harder to do things positive. You ever notice that, how hard it is? You should be. It's easy not to exercise. It's real easy not to exercise and to sit home and drink sodas and to eat pies, cakes, cookies, and all the bad food. It's easy to do that. It's harder to get up every day and exercise. It's harder to eat salad every day. It's harder to to eat healthy or whatever whatever that is every day. Okay? It's easy to think that, oh, I'm stupid. Nothing's to me. Things are not going to work out. This is who I am. I must have been born this way. Even though God is saying that's not the case, but it's easier to give into those feelings. So we just give into them. That's the flesh. It's easy to give into that, right? It's harder to be what God has called us to be because it requires some work. It requires some determination on our part. So again, in closing, this is It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach with your host, Sister A. Legree, providing information and support while encouraging hope and faith. If you're, just a couple of announcements. If you are in the area, the Hyattsville, Maryland area, I know a lot of people watch us from all over. We're going to be having a mental health event on the 21st, which is that Saturday, starting at 10 o'clock from 10 to 1. Please come out. It's free. Bring people with you. We'll have some free giveaways and things like that. There'll be other people with me, so please kind of do that. Also, if you can log on to our website, igbatt1@aol.com, that will be helpful. If you would like to support us financially, you can do so by Cash App or going on to our website. We have a PayPal. You can always mail us. That it would be appreciated as well, especially as we prepare for our mental health month event that's coming up that we actually sponsor ourselves financially. So if you want to help us, please Cash App us or go onto our website and make a donation. It would be again would be appreciative. Also, a couple of things. Yeah. I need to start writing these things down. We also have our hotline, our information support hotline. You can call us from anywhere in the United States on Thursdays during the times that we're open, that the hotline is open. And even if it's not, you can leave us a message. If you need any resources, we can try to help you, put you in contact with the right person. Please feel free to do that. Again, our website, igbatt.com.